also, Mark, if every night was a council night, I would lose a lot of weight because I never eat before council.
You're just never happy. I'm not sure where are you?
Well, that's the way I mean. That's how I feel too.
What does it feel? What does it
I
feel
hate
right?
that place. I'm not
Well,
worried about something.
it's the only restaurant.
I mean, that actually, I agree. Yeah.
Gotta support my tax.
Oh yeah, you left it off the agenda. Mayor and I were talking about that.
Every time I go for ice cream, though, the ice cream machine's broken.
Does somebody need this?
I think it's just scratching out.
I can't remember now. But that's good. I just didn't remember that.
Sit there and watch it.
That's really not a good deal,
Yeah, Commissioner's Court went at least 6 hours today. At least 6. Well, they had like 100 people for comment. Thank you. It was okay you missed last week.
Ladies and gentlemen, the time is 6:30. We're going to call this meeting to order. First item will be the invocation and pledge to U.S. and Texas flag. Uncle Long God, dear Lord, we want to thank you for allowing us to live here and be good citizens within our community, good Christians with our fellow citizens, that you guide us with your wisdom in everything that we do. We thank you for everything that you present us on a daily basis, and that you watch over each and every one of us and our family members and those members of our country that do things such as helping those that such as yourself. All right. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, so as I say in every meeting, the rules are in effect. For those that may have not ever heard me say that before, that means plain nice people back there, pretty much. Before we get into citizens' comments, we have a proclamation tonight, so I am going to step out here and speak in a loud voice. Yes, if you will come up, ma'am. All right. Well, we were kidding. You're not having much. All right, this is going to be the first thing before I say a lot of whereases. All right, this week is Constitution Week for 2019. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government and republic dedicated to the rule by law, and whereas September 17, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, be resolved that I, P. Short, Mayor of the City of McLendon-Chisholm, Texas, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through September 23rd as Constitution Week. And we ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideas the framers of the Constitution held in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through the guardians of our liberty. Now, it's Constitution Week. This young lady is here representing the Daughters of the American Revolution. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Now, no, sir. All right. Now, before we get into citizens' comments, folks, we've got a couple of different things going on tonight. We have the public hearings on the tax rate and on the annual budget. If you want to speak during those two for one or the other, if you would wait to speak during those rather than citizens' comments. Those that are here over 7.8, where they're talking about, where there's going to be a presentation about the Triple Creek Developers Agreement. Citizens' comments will be the time for you to talk about that. What I'm trying to do is give everybody a fair amount of time. If you want to talk about the budget, the tax rate, there's two public hearings for that. If you want to talk about the Triple Creek citizens' comments, it's the best time for that. Everybody good? All right. First person in, before I forget, when you come up to the podium, if you push the button, make sure the red light lights up around the microphone so we can hear you. State your name and your address for us for the record. First one up, Mr. Herron.
Evening, Jim Herron, 1148 Warwick Court, McLendon-Chisholm. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. This is my first opportunity to actually come before and address you since I got off the City Council. What I wanted to do was come in and actually I had meant to come in and tell you, congratulate you individually and tell you thank you for your service. I know this is a thankless job, and I just want to thank you on behalf of all the citizens, even though they don't tell you that. Thank you for doing it. It's definitely a thankless job, and you're not going to please everybody, so don't even try. Just do the right thing all the time, and you'll have no regrets. So one of the things I want to talk about was, I got several things I wanted to talk about. One was infrastructure. I'm hoping that we haven't dropped the ball on that. I know that we've got plans to move forward with 205. I can see they're working on 550, and as they're going to be widening 205. So, you know, making sure that we're going to continue to look at what we're going to do to expand our infrastructure, and what are we doing as far as the comprehensive building plan. I was talking to Mr. Kipphut about that. You know, we talked about looking at going out and redoing our comprehensive building plan, looking at our new infrastructure that's going to be in place with 205 and 550, where we're going to put our location for our businesses in the future, because probably don't have very many businesses that want to come in this time until actually all the infrastructure gets in place. But once it's in place, we need to decide what we want to have, and probably need to have that in place before they start doing the road. So just something to think about, and I'm hoping that you're working on that. I haven't been in town, and I'd like to be part of that as much as possible, so I'm on the building plan, so I'd like to help do as much as we can there. And then as far as 7.8, my thoughts there on that you have a plan in place that exists today. Developers are for-profit entities. They're there to make money, and so whatever they're doing, they're going to do it so that they make the most amount of money possible. So just whatever they tell you, make sure that you get whatever they say in writing, just like you would in your own house. If you're getting somebody that's coming to do work at your house, make sure everything they say is in writing, And I would say don't lower or lessen any of the requirements to allow them to come in. So if today the requirement is that they have to put the golf course in before they can put in any houses, I wouldn't reduce that, because if you go and take a look at what happened to Rolette with that area off of I-30 and Dow Rock Road, the developer there made all kinds of wild promises. They didn't get it in writing, and they built all the apartment complexes, and they reneged on all the rest of the things they said they were going to do. So I would learn a lesson from what happened to Rolette and on Dow Rock Road over there. The other thing I would say is that we also need to look at Sonoma Verde. We had additional costs that we never knew, never anticipated, and so before we go in and build any new large housing subdivision, we need to look at what the infrastructure costs are going to be to the city. We need to understand what that is, because those costs are later on going to be borne by the citizens of this city at some time in the future. So just need to take a look and make sure that we're doing things smartly. I do appreciate all the work that you're doing, and that it is a thankless job. Thank you for doing the job and willingness to be here twice every month and taking the abuse that I know that you're already taking. So I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Donegan?
Well, that was quick. My name is Sharon Donegan. I live at 2620 Ridge Lake Lane, and I'm here to speak in regards to this and the future budgets. First of all, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to come up here and speak. I'd like to thank Councilman Dahl for his time in explaining the issues dealing with the budget. He gave my husband a very good explanation for this proposed tax. We also received a letter from Councilwoman Kipphut that mentioned the proposed tax. Due to the importance of the information, the process of communicating, it's better when prompted by the council. Getting complete and thorough information while attending a city council is challenging at best. We're both concerned about the future of the tax rate after this budget year, because the previous council's actions regarding the SAFER grant, which we both felt unnecessary and void of strong approval, we now have a more complex situation. A thorough study of how the city plans to address the future to include funding and level of service should be a priority to the city staff and council. The development of potential policy and ramifications are hopefully being initiated now. Town hall meetings should be utilized to inform the citizens. In regards to the proposed development, agenda item number 7-8, we are not in favor for many reasons, and lot size is important, but there are other critical issues in planning for the development in our city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Quinn?
Good evening, Robert Quinn, 1401 Carrara Drive. Triple Creek. So lot size, obviously, one issue there. I think you all voiced support for a certain lot size, acre and a half. I think there's some give there myself. I think 1 acre lot sizes are something that we could get behind, but if they want to revisit the plan and change the plan, I think the whole plan needs to be revisited, not just dropping a golf course to give us some ball fields. A golf course is going to bring in revenue from outside of our area, and that's not a bad thing. But if that's going away and it's just going to be ball fields and all that, now we need a park and rec department, right? It's nothing but cost on us. And again, the same concerns that when Sonoma Verde went in with the traffic and all that, yes, roads are being widened, but it's going to be a nightmare for the foreseeable future. Adding more construction trucks at this time, probably not a great idea. That's what I have for Triple Creek 7.8 on the list. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Mr. Reynolds?
Larry Reynolds, 851 South Highway 205. And thank y'all for what y'all do. I'm glad Jim said something about that. But anyway, I'm just against that high density thing. You know, all I see everywhere I've seen that, like Heartland and stuff like that, where they start doing all that kind of stuff, makes you go, rental, crime. I mean, there is nothing good that goes on out there. My daughter and them lived out there, and it turned into a big, you know, you just end up, it's just not a good thing. I don't have it, and like he said, the infrastructure and all that, but just, you know, I think we ought to go with a, you know, I'm not totally for, I mean, I like the 1.5 acre thing, but I'm not against something a little smaller, you know, but not like that. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Turnbull? There you go. Thank you.
Turnbull, 1117 Newkirk Court. I'm here to talk about the development, and I want to quote a very wise gentleman who addressed the special meeting of the P&Z on April 17, 2014, when the subject was discussed. He stated he respected the developer trying to be generous, but he was against the development, and please do not let greed play a factor in this. And tonight I'll ask you the same thing. Don't trade the ballparks, the soccer fields, and accept the cost that goes with them from the developer. And Mr. Bloom, I appreciate your wise advice at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Ms. Balcom? Are you waiting? I'm sorry, yours is waiting for the public hearing? I apologize. Brian, where you at? You're up.
15 Fireside Drive, that's in Chisholm Crossing. Regarding the Triple Creek subdivision, as I understand with this current council, they're kind of testing the waters in terms of where you guys land on the 1.5 acre minimum. I'd like to think that the owners of the proposed property have the same desires as the rest of our citizens and respect the desires of the rest of our citizens, but it appears that may not be the case. Bottom line is that we do have a minimum lot size requirement for a reason, and we do not have the infrastructure currently to support such a subdivision where it currently is proposed. And if this council entertains discussions with this developer, it's my belief that they would be undermining the will of the people. Developers will tell you that 1.5 acre lot subdivisions aren't profitable. What they mean is that they aren't profitable enough. There's clearly the desire and demand for 1.5 acre lots, and I believe this makes McLendon-Chisholm a unique destination for people seeking a little more space, close to amenities and within commuting distance to Dallas. What we have seen by past developers is that you shouldn't believe everything they say. Baseball and soccer fields, pools, and golf courses are just diversions from the true goal of a developer, to cram as many homes into as small an area as possible, while burdening the homeowners or the city with maintenance costs of poorly and hastily constructed amenities. That's a horrible precedent to set. I do have one item that I'd like to take off agenda, and that's in regards to overpayment of city salaries. I'd like to think that those that question their own, I like to thank those that question their own paychecks and notifying the city of being overpaid. However, it raises some very serious questions regarding the city's and the city accountant's ability to be good stewards of our hard-earned money. I know you can't directly respond to questions during citizens' comments, but I offer the following questions to maybe be addressed at some later point. Where is the checks and balances? Pun intended. Who is putting their eyes on the bank statements? Do each of the council members see those statements? I recognize that budgets aren't set payment schedules, but some items like salaries are a known quantity. So I urge you to get more eyes on the city's bank accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis?
Michael Davis, 106 Cheney Place. I find myself echoing what some of the other citizens have said here about 7.8, the Triple Creek expansion. Simple case, there just isn't the infrastructure to support the density of that. The future use land maps that, while somewhat outdated from a couple of years ago, at no point have that level of density in that area. And if anybody tried to get out of the city this morning, you'd know exactly what type of traffic we're dealing with right now. And that's minus, 300 new houses, each house averaging 2 new cars, 600 new cars, in a time when we're coming up on 205 being shut down and under construction for a decade. 550 right now is in the midst of it. Neither of those roads are controlled by the city, which means that their maintenance and repair is at the purview of a governing body outside of this chamber. If those roads are too small for it, we have no control or influence to guarantee that they'll get big enough to meet the growth of what's coming in. Altera already has a new development going down to that area. That's going to add density. That's outside of the control, but that's there. Having another one in there amongst everything else that's going to be rolling through here, I think that would be ill-sighted for the time frame that we have. At some point in the future, there may be a place where we go back and start looking at grinding greater and greater density. But I think right now, while we could look at 1 acre lots to be accommodating potentially if it came down to it in the right area, 1/16 of an acre lot in these places. I think the largest one they're going to be proposing is a 1/3 acre. That's just too much for that space for this road to try to get in and out across here. We don't need the tax dollars or the burden that's going to come with that. The police force needed to go in with that, the additional load on the fire department to go in there. Then just, again, the fact that we don't have the infrastructure to support that, taxes aside. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. If there's no one else for citizens' comments for the evening, citizens' comments are closed. All right. Next thing, 6.1. It's going to be the August 13th, 2019 draft city council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes for the August 13th city council meeting.
All right. Do I have a second? I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? If there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye. That's fine. All right, next one. August 27th draft city council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the August 27th, 2019 city council meeting minutes as drafted.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, those two items are done. Now, moving into item 7.1. Public hearing received comments regarding setting the tax rate to 0.165000 per $100 valuation on all taxable property for fiscal year starting October 1, 2019, ending September 30th, 2020. All right, it is now 6:52. Public hearing is now open. Ms. Balkin, you're the only one that has given us a sheet at this time.
Actually, that document was supposed to be given earlier. I didn't realize you were.
No, you're fine.
So, you are planning to talk about Triple Creek still? You didn't knock that off?
On
Later?
Towards the end, yes.
Okay, great. Adrian Balcom, 1518 Forenza Court. I just wanted to say that when we started the department for fire rescue, is that it was supposed to be a good thing to where we wanted to make sure that we are meeting a certain budget, okay? And what I would ask the council to do is, based on the information that you are receiving, I think that it's time to actually go back and review the numbers, especially with the salaries, and what is the actual requirements, TCFP and also the codes for NFPA in regarding the equipment and things of that nature, just for your own personal knowledge. And I'm going to tell you that I learned a lot in 2018 when I started on this path to determine if this is going to be the right thing for the city. And I know that each one of you know that a lot of the firemen really appreciate the changes of being a part of a city department because they got more benefits. But at the same time, the responsibility of our city, we have to manage a budget. And just knowing that the SAFER grant, just in the name is adequate, is the word adequate. Is it meeting our current needs? And so there's a responsibility to make sure that we are looking at the call volume. And I know it's going to be like one of those nail-biting teeth situations where you don't want to have to be the bad guy to have to let certain people go. But there is opportunities elsewhere as well if they want to continue their career as a firefighter. But we have to meet what our current needs are in our community. And I talked about this a little bit whenever I was on city council a year ago, and I showed different numbers from all the surrounding cities all the way to Dallas. And so it's all important information, and it can weigh on you because you have to make those tough decisions. But I would like to see that you guys actually look at the numbers so that you can actually meet those current standards that is expected for cities to have a city-owned fire department. And that starts with TCFP, because we wanted to make sure that all the firefighters are adequate to, because if someone should perish, I mean, that is not something that you guys want to have on your hands, because y'all are responsible for the staff that's hired at the end of the day. I know that, Mr. Bloom, that you're in, it's a dangerous thing too. You got lots of things going on in your mind when you're out on a call. And the fact that the name of the department as rescue, that should be a huge impact to the city to know that they're going to be there. And so when you say things like, we're not going to be able to, meet this current level of service, it's not something that you want to don't want to sit there and say to the city, because people want to know with peace of mind, knowing that you're going to be there. They're going to be there to rescue that person, whether it's an MVA or maybe a lift assist or even a structure fire. But the main thing I want you guys to understand and be encouraged to, to do the due diligence of looking at the numbers, knowing what our call volume is, and making sure that we are meeting that number with adequate staffing. The SAFER grant is a blessing, and we could really go off into a different direction, or we can actually keep going on a good direction by making the best decision that's best for our city. So anyway, and the other thing I'm sorry I didn't mention in the city comments, is that, when you're looking at this map, just know that this is just like a little bit of the puzzle, and understand that the contract that was already stated many years ago about the golf course, it's going to be one of those things that you have to make this tough decision and stand and not waiver what that development agreement is, and that's why that's there in that place. So I just urge you to definitely look at the information and be considerate that most of the people that are here, that live here for a reason. It's because of the open spaces, because of the type of lifestyle. I was a Houston city gal. I came out here to get away from the high traffic and sitting in traffic for 2 hours, both ways. And I know that we have a little bit of traffic problem. It's nowhere compared to Houston or even Dallas. But anyway, just hopefully you will take my points and consider doing the research. It is a lot of reading, but it's good information just for you guys to even know for yourselves.
Thank you, ma'am. Scott, you want to talk on both right now, or just one at each time?
One each time.
Okay, that's fine. You're next.
Scott Turnbull, 1117 Newkirk Court. In regards to your tax rate, I hope you'll reconsider. I I appreciate the sales pitch that you've given on it, that you're doing it for public safety. However, the numbers don't add up. You're looking at buying an $850,000 ladder truck, and that's being pushed because it's going to be almost out of date. What's being ignored is you have 3 other vehicles, actually 4 other vehicles, that are either at or past the recommended age, that you will not have money to replace and still have money for the ladder truck. So, frankly, I think your use of public safety as a fleecing method to get an increased tax rate is abominable. And again, I hope that you will reconsider it. And I hope that you have a budget that will work at the rollback rate, because if this rate passes, I can promise you that there will be a rollback election. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Kipphut, 31 Fireside. With regard to the tax rate, 2 weeks ago I made a comment that I wasn't sure the dots connected. I'm not sure everybody heard exactly what I was saying, but at the end of the day, what I was saying was the budget didn't necessarily equate to the necessarily tax rate. Since that time, I applaud the city staff for the work that's been done, and now see the clear need to sustain that pull forward on a 16.5 tax rate. I found the prior speaker's comments reprehensible to threaten the city. A city threatened them with a rollback election based on their own actions that resulted in the financial difficulties that the city lays in now. Code enforcement was something they brought forward but did not properly provision for. You have. I applaud you for that. Consolidation roles and missions into a single individual, collapsing the size of the city staff, has left in an overworked staff, and mistakes Mr. Caldroni pointed out. This budget starts to fix that and gets back into appropriate checks and balances inside our administrative side of the government. Fire department, probably the most controversial subject the city has faced over the last 3 years. We had a very well-functioning volunteer fire department. Decision was made by the prior council to bring that into the city. Long-term, probably the right decision. The issue was about the timeline. It's now been done. It's water under the bridge. To start provisioning to move forward is a necessary step. Whether or not the vehicles are in the appropriate condition or not, interesting question, should have been asked by the prior council. They were the ones that purchased them. So we'll excuse that aside and then move on to the reserve funds. And finally, we have a council that's going to create a fund balance policy for reserve funds, which will specifically allow funds not to be moved around as prior was done previously with excess funds that were used to buy unnecessary equipment, in my judgment. But at the end of the day, this council is moving forward, and I applaud the council for creating that policy, for putting those funds into that policy, and then therefore provision the city. I think long-term we will have that. So I guess I'm going to reserve my last comment, and I ask the indulgence of the council and the mayor. But with regard to Mr. Turnbull, I would offer my counsel to you would be push for an election, and you're going to have to answer all the questions about why that election was necessary. You will be held accountable for your own actions. So, thank you.
Thanks, sir. If you're wanting to speak during this, you just got to come up to the podium and name and address. I do applaud both of you for raising your hand, though.
David Black at Sienna Lane. I'm not sure what decorum is in this city, but for people to complain against each other with no facts, the rest of us are kind of lost, but you're in charge. Also, I think I've heard the chief did say trucks don't have to cost $800,000. So I don't know if that's true or not. I'm hoping that's true because, like someone said, the numbers wouldn't necessarily work out if that was the case. I was looking at the minutes of the last meeting regarding the tax items, and a lot of people talked about transparency, which can be a generic term and is quite often overused, but a few people gave specifics. I haven't seen any answers to those specifics in the additional, very minor additional information that was provided in the agenda packet. So unfortunately, I didn't meet, like Mark did, with anyone there to be convinced of the numbers, and maybe he's the only one in the entire city that did. Again, it would be good for people to see how the numbers work out to arrive at the rate. I know last time Councilman Dahl had said the CPA came up with a number as a break-even number for SAFER. That's great. Are those records public knowledge? Can we see them? You know, just as a matter of transparency. I appreciate, though, you did include the fund balances you plan in your staff report for the city's fund balance policy, so I guess that includes the tax assumption of the new tax rate. So thanks for that.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am?
Valerie Bodart, 402 Cattle Barron Drive. My first thing is, I believe someone violated a decorum rule. I don't know what the rules are especially, but as far as berating someone else who just spoke, I don't think that that's acceptable or good. All those meetings that you all had, the workshop, the retreat, I don't know how many workshops it was, but I was here. And I saw so much indecision and so much confusion. And I left the final time not knowing if you guys really even knew what you wanted to do. But suddenly now you have a budget. It took a long time, but now it's raised a lot of questions. And I really hope that you all have studied it out, that you've consulted with the appropriate people who know what they're doing, and knowing that this is your first budget as a council, but still, this is very important to our city. I heard a lot of the word transparency being used and good stewards for the city. I hope that y'all meant all of that, because looking at the budget and hearing what I've heard, I think y'all have a little ways to go on that. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, if there is no one else on 7.1, public hearing on setting the tax rate, the time is 7:07. Public hearing's closed on that one. All right, moving on to 7.2, public hearing to receive input regarding a proposed annual budget for the fiscal year starting October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020. Time is now 7:08. That one, Mr. Turnbull.
Scott Turnbull, 1117 Newkirk Court. On the budget, I find it interesting that comments have been made about how there would be no fat in the budget, that a laser pointer was going to be used, and you let one of your department heads put a blanket 15% increase on his expenses without justification. I know very little companies, or very few companies, excuse me, that give across the board 7% raises to their employees. You are budgeting for possible employees. You are budgeting to make up shortfalls in one department with money out of the general fund, or at least that's what your budget appears to show. Again, I think as far as transparency, you haven't met your goal. There's a lot of things that you need to explain. One thing is there was a vote taken to set the SAFER grant salaries at $45,000. Most of the SAFER grant personnel, if they work all of their overtime, are making over $50,000, but their base salaries are over the $45,000 that was set by the council in a 5-0 vote. None of this has been addressed. So I would ask between now and the time when you pass this budget that you go back and review that and find out if you're in compliance with what has been passed and put before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. If there's no one else on 7.2,
This is the budget, right? Budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so I did talk with Fire Chief Simmons a couple months ago. It's okay, it's good. Is that I gave him some ideas about how to bring in other monies for the city, and that is charging the unincorporated area. And I know that there's over 60 cities that do this, so that would take the time to do some research on that and how that happens. Essentially, it would mean that you would have to make a resolution, and then there's a master fee schedule and all that, but that could be another way to bring in revenue for the city. And essentially, you're not charging the entire incorporated area, but it would be only whenever there's an actual call and we respond. And it's similar to what the Rockwall County EMS does. And so it is possible. It's just a matter of administration, and the volume that we do have is something that we can do within house, unless I really don't think that there is an affordable third party that you could do the billing with, but I think that we can manage it in house. Anyway, so that's something that I would hope that y'all will consider as a project within next year to start doing a process of getting administration taken care of for billing the unincorporated area for those type of services. Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you. Robert Quinn, 1401 Carrera. I think we've got some belt tightening in our future. I think that some criticism you guys have received about putting money away for a rainy day, well, that's the whole point of it being projected, right? We don't know what we don't know. But I don't know about you, but I've got a savings account for a reason. It's kind of saved my butt this year. You don't know that the mother-in-law is going to, have dementia, and, you don't know that your car is going to get wrecked and your kid's car is going to get wrecked. You don't know these things. You don't know that the next round of storms coming through is going to tear us up. So, yeah, putting money away for a rainy day, I'm absolutely for that. We've got infrastructure that's not apparent to a lot of people. Apparently we have some sewage pumps that are 6 years old thanks to the Sonoma Verde development, and they last 10 to, if you're very, very lucky and very, very rigid on your maintenance. They last maybe up to 20 years. So, we got some things that are coming down the road that we didn't have any money set aside for. So I'm all for putting the money away for a rainy day. Wow, it's been an expensive year. And we haven't had the revenue coming in from fees and all of that it seemed to me the previous council planned on and based their rainy day fund and everything else on blue sky scenarios that we can't count on. So again, if we need to raise taxes, we need to raise taxes but it's interesting that Councilwoman Balcom came up, no criticism, just observation, and simultaneously said that we need to fund the fire department and we need to make any cuts we need to make. It was interesting that she seemed to be advocating for cutting and maintaining the fire department at the same time. Yeah. Long story short, I think you guys are doing the right things in terms of setting aside for a rainy day. I think having more eyes on our finances is a good idea. And, if this is the budget for the year, great, but you're going to have a lot of eyes out here watching and making sure you guys are doing what needs to be done with our money at every step. So you guys know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. All right.
Michael Davis, 106 Cheney Place. I opted not to speak on the tax rate because I'm not actually concerned about the tax rate. The move from 15 to 16.5, while not ideal for anybody who's spending money right now, it's not ideal. It works out to like $75 for the household. It's not much. What will go to my school taxes will, just demolish that to the ground. So that's not a concern financially. I would say that on the budget itself, I'm torn philosophically on the flat increases towards the fire department. I know that there need to be specific increases, planned increases for that. I'm not a fan of just across the board increases in budget. I'm generally a zero-based budget approach annually. And I know a lot of government offices, a lot of government-related offices for that matter, will tend to do this approach of, it's likely going to be there, we'll build it into it. But in my case, it almost always ends up being an extra fluff. If money's there, money will be spent. And if we adopt an approach that says that we will just across the board increase the next year, if we spent all the money that we said we would increase, then we're just going to justify wanting to increase again. So I'm hesitant towards that approach. I am happy that the biggest bulk of that increase, as inconvenient as it is in fact just for the rainy day fund, basically for a buffer. And I say that because while there is no question that there is definitely some bloat in fat in the budget, there are revenues that I think are higher, unjustified than what they are, and there are expenses that are lower. And I don't know that there's a solid justification for some of those expenditures going lower. But at least the biggest part of that increase is an increase that hasn't actually been assigned to anything. Because if we're going to raise the budget of the city, I'd at least rather have the protection of knowing that if building permits come in low, if the market collapses and our valuations plummet next year, that we'll have some room in next year's budget to be able to absorb that. But just know that that is not me saying that I want to see us increase another, $150,000 next year, or $300,000 towards $250 towards ad valorem taxes specifically. If we need to grow a budget, we need to build money in there. I'd like to see some more creative ways of doing that, but I will at least commend the council for coming up with a budget that has a buffer, knowing good and well that buffer may shrink, as we saw with the projected versus budgeted fee permits for the last year. So I want to put that out there. I don't want to spend more money, but on the budget itself, as you guys come to the finalized plan, I would like to see you tighten up the buffers in there, but overall, keep keep the fattest part of that in an area where we have the ability to shrink that if we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. If there is no other comments, the time is 7:18. Public hearing on the budget is closed. Moving on to, thank you, Robert. 7.3, discussion and action regarding an ordinance approving and adopting the budget for the fiscal year starting October 1st, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020. I'll entertain any motions.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, based on the comments today and some of the discussions we've had, move to postpone the adoption of the budget until the September 24th, 2019 regular City Council meeting.
Okay. Do I have a second? All right, I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to 7.4, discussion and action regarding a resolution updating the city's... Huh?
May I just add one thing? Real
Yes,
quick,
sir.
too?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. It's just to throw it out there. Also, the tax rates, we need to set a date. It doesn't have to be a vote or anything like
Okay.
that. We just need to, and I would go ahead and recommend September 24th, date, time, and location
We'll set
to adopt
September
the tax rate.
24th as
Okay.
that same council meeting will be for both.
Lisa was worried about us. So she wanted to-
Okay. That's fine. Throw her under. All right, 7.4, discussion and action regarding a resolution updating the city's investment policy. Do I have a motion on that?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to update the city's investment policy as written.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? It's open for discussion. Okay, if there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, 7.5, discussion and action regarding a resolution establishing the city's fund balance policy. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to approve the ordinance establishing the city's fund balance policy as presented.
All right, do I have a second? All right, I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's actually a resolution.
Resolution.
Sorry. All right, that one's done. 7.6, discussion and action regarding an ordinance approving an amendment to the existing Kingsbridge Plan Development Office 1 zoning district to change the rear building setback to 15 feet and to allow a maximum lot coverage required of 40% as defined by the McLendon-Chisholm zoning ordinance. This property location is described as 1.065 acres, also described as 5763 South State Highway 205, McLendon-Chisholm. Do I have a motion on this?
I move to adopt the ordinance approving the amendment as explained by...
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? There's no discussion. All in
Same
favor? Aye.
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 Okay. 7.7. Discussion and action regarding a request by Councilmember Kipphut to work with the city administrator in drafting a letter to Texas Department of Transportation, or TxDOT, requesting installation of turn lanes into subdivisions as part of the State Highway 205 construction project, and share such information at the next County Road Consortium meeting. Ms. Kipphut, I'll turn it over to you.
Lisa and I met with the Rockwall County contractor that works with the county to on the 205 expansion. And as far back as 2017, our city was approached by a couple of the subdivisions in the area to work turn bays or turn lanes into the subdivisions based on the 205 expansion. So Ms. Colombo and I are seeking council approval to go ahead and work with Rockwall County and TxDOT to start the discussions on those turn bays. And we'll do that with a letter to the road consortium, and then I will brief the road consortium the last meeting in the last Wednesday of September. So we'll try to get the letter in place before the end of the month. So I'm just seeking council's approval for Lisa and I to proceed.
I think it's a wise decision based on the expansion of the road. If we don't have turn lanes or turn bays, however we want to call them. Traffic's already bad enough for everybody going in both directions. When they open up and make more lanes, got to have a lane to turn. Makes it easier for everybody and it's safer. Council, are we all in favor?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, Lisa, make it happen. All right, move on to 7.8. City Council will receive a presentation, discussion, and may provide direction to the applicant related to a future request to amend the Triple Creek Developers Agreement to allow planned development for approximately 145 acres of land surrounding City Hall to include 350 single-family homes. Mr. Cardwell, is he here?
Actually, we had a change
of
presenters.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, whoever's supposed to present, welcome.
I work with Dean Cardwell at Bowler Engineering. I'm here to represent Oak National Holdings. And I think what I'm seeing is everybody here seems to be familiar with what's on the table for discussion. We have obviously an active population here. So rather than go through, which I'm happy to discuss it as much as you want, but rather than go through in detail what we're proposing, before I do that, I would like to kind of give my take on what I see in this area. And I'm right now I'm at 4504 Lakeview Drive in Frisco, which is a concentrated area, if you will. It's a developed city. I've only been in that area for 2 years. We moved from Virginia to be closer to my in-laws, and we come from in Virginia. The government structure is set up a little differently, but we come from a similar area to this. We had 2-acre minimum in our county, and when someone would come in and want to do something smaller, it was always a battle. And frankly, I applaud our general system that gives everybody the right to come up here and say it, and burdens you with the difficulty to make that decision. It isn't an easy one. And I'll just based on my years of experience, I'll try and share what I see that decision entailing. When I drove in, I came down and I saw the population sign as I was coming in, and I don't know if it was current, but I think it said 1373 as the population.
It's way out of date.
Okay. Well, and I assumed that just from this because it sounded like the whole population was here at that point. So I assumed that was a little bit outdated. But my point being that it is a small community, and then I come in and maybe fortuitous to hear the discussions that I've heard historically from my old communities of. We need these facilities, we need these things, and we need to be able to afford them. And how do we do that? Do we raise the taxes? Do we invite more development? And it's a hard decision. It's frankly very polarizing, I guess is a good word. One of the solutions that we would come up with, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of what my thought process was, so I'm going to stop before I say that and say, in my mind, and I'm not a planner, I'm an engineer. But in my mind, there's an optimal ratio of population to facilities. And I would give the analogy of an office, where if you have an office that has a receptionist, if you have 2 people in that office and a receptionist, that receptionist is a big percentage of what your costs are. If you have 10 people in that office, it's easier to afford that. And that's similar to what city burden is. You've got a certain base cost for what you need to have in the city. You have to have some of the operations in this building, some of the things that are going on you have to have. The more population you have, the easier it is to afford that. The flip side is, as you cross that optimal threshold, then you have to grow your infrastructure. So that's the difficult balance, and that's your challenge, frankly, is to try and determine what that right balance is for McLendon-Chisholm. And I can't give you that answer, and I don't even pretend to know the answer. I'm not a planner, I'm an engineer. Planners may have a better idea than I do, but I don't know the answer to that question. I know that one way that we tried to, in my old community, to address that a little bit was minimizing the infrastructure required for the population. And the way we did that, we called it cluster development, where if somebody wanted to come in and develop 200 acres, but they didn't want to build the roads that it would take to do 2-acre lots, they would consolidate that, and they would build just a portion of that and put those lots in with less roads, and they might be half-acre lots with open space around it. And that's a little less drainage piping, sewer pipe, water pipe, all those things are a little bit less. The road maintenance, all those things go down a little bit. So it was one way to do that. I don't know that it's an exact parallel, but as I'm sitting here and looking at where this development is proposed, being kind of around City Hall and with the kind of the central area there, it almost looks like that's kind of what we're talking about here is a more dense area that you could have more population, get a bigger tax base out of a smaller footprint with less infrastructure costs. That's a purely engineering perspective. That's after 30 years of being an engineer, that's what I'm limited to, is an engineering perspective. But when I look at the developments that I work on, if the capital outlay is an issue, and I'm talking in terms of the developer, but there are similar things to the municipality that's being affected by this, a smaller footprint and denser footprint, there are some advantages to that. For instance, if your population was centered around one fire station that had a good reaction time to that, you might not need that second fire station. So there are advantages to having that dense area. In my mind, this is one example of doing that, is keeping this a smaller footprint. You're closer to, for instance, a fire station. There's already some sewer service here that we could tie into, so there's a little bit less infrastructure cost with something like this. And what I've given you is, I don't want to be, I don't want to be obscure in what I'm saying. The way we looked at it is the developer came in with a big piece of land. We limited him to a portion of that land, so that the overall density was not, it might have been a little greater, but not a whole lot greater, but it allowed him to have a little less infrastructure in there. So what I'm talking about is actually a smaller development, and I guess what we're proposing here is focusing that within the community into one development. That's kind of my perception on what's being proposed here. The other thoughts I had, and these are mine, like I say, from my experience, is I know that the way that original developers agreement was written is that the golf course would go in first. I've worked with some developers that were building golf courses. I have yet to work with one that said it was a moneymaker. So don't be careful looking at it that way. If you think it's going to bring money in, what it brings in is a little bit of traffic, not a lot. It brings in people for the day and then they go home again. If you're within 10 miles of a golf course, that's close. So to think that that's going to bring a lot of development around or something like that, I'm not sure that's really true. I haven't seen that. When I see a golf course getting built, it's typically in the midst of when a large development is going in and it's complementing that development. So to think that it would go in before, I'm not sure how that would work out, and I don't know how that developer's agreement was put together, but I think it would be a hard thing to ask that go in first. I don't know how that was negotiated, and I don't know that any of you were on the negotiation team when that happened, but that's a big give from a developer's perspective. Having said that, the way to get a golf course in, if you want something like that, is to bring the rooftops in first. And that's just kind of the age-old developers. You get the rooftops first, and then you get the commercial, and then you get the other development, the supporting development. So I'm not telling you things you don't already know. It's a hard decision. It is a dense subdivision. It does not meet the 1.5 acre that people are talking about. What we've tried to do is put some area up front for some parks that we felt like would be something good for the community. What's up along the road is the 3rd acre lots are along the road, and they get more dense as you go back, and they do get down to 50 feet by 100 foot lot, which, by the way, is what I've moved into from my old 2 acre lot, and I'm still adjusting. So it is an adjustment. So I'm not going to stand here and kid you that it's the same thing. It is a different product. There are benefits. There's a tax benefit, and there are costs. I mean, it will bring in some traffic. Part of what we would do is a traffic impact analysis, and we would look at what's in the area, what intersections are having problems. So those analyses are things that happen, and this is the notes that I wrote down here. It's not exactly what I came in intending to say, but just to try and give you as much of what I've been through as I can so that you can make an informed decision on this. And I know you're not making a decision tonight, but I'll leave cards with whoever wants them, and I'm happy to discuss it and meet with you in a similar forum or one-on-one or however you want to do it and talk to you about it, because it's not an easy decision. And I appreciate your time. I can talk for a very long time when you give me a microphone.
Thank you so much, sir. I think at this point, we'll look at the information. I mean, we do have certain processes with city staff, P&Z, and all that. We do have a comprehensive plan, and as the mayor, right now, we have to support what our citizens want. And if the citizens say they want to reduce that requirement, then we can entertain certain things. But right now, we got to go through the process, and you know, all parties involved have to look at it, from city staff to P&Z.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna give you a false hope.
I totally understand.
On anything, you know, but we are not in a position we're going to turn our nose up to anybody saying we're not willing to listen to what you have to offer.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
Well,
thank you.
I would just like to comment that it is an easy decision for me, unfortunately, and I will never, ever vote for anything like this in our city. And simply because of all the citizens I've spoken with, not one has ever asked for this. The acre minimum has been what a lot of people have backed off to. I live in a neighborhood of 1.5 acres. That was the whole city at the time. And like that, and personally, if that is the future of our city and we have acre lots and we don't get the rooftops and we don't get some of the stuff that may come with that, then so be it. I mean, I think a lot of citizens support that. And
I think you do eventually get there. I think it takes longer,
yes,
and
sir.
it's difficult, but it does.
Agreed. And going back to Mr. Turnbull had pointed out, in 2014 I addressed Mr. Davenport on this issue at a city hall meeting, and I believe Mr. Caldronia said it better. It's not that developers can't make money, be profitable. It's how much do they have to make. I put it a little more tersely with the word greed, which I'll defer to Brian. He's more eloquent. So I do think that a developer can make money and still fit in with this city and make citizens happy they're here. And I don't think we're here with this.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Robert, will you hit that button for me again? All right. I don't know that we have any updates, discussion, or direction for staff. All right. Under number 8? Okay. Moving on to number 9. I really don't have a whole lot as far as reports or announcements. For those of you that weren't aware of it, Saturday night was a big, it's called Bubbles and Bags event, raising money for the Child Advocacy Center of Rockwall. If you've been on Facebook, yes, that is me dancing with a woman's purse to raise money for children. I've taken part in helping raise that money for the last 2 years. Guys, I'm going to tell you, those of you that are here that are married, and those of you ladies that are in here, you were paid a huge, huge compliment at the Bubbles and Bag by an officer that lives there in Parker. The event was at South Fork Ranch. One of the Parker police officers, an older gentleman, was there working the event, and he looked over at me and he says, I'm moving to Rockwall. He said, I'm moving to Rockwall. I said, you are? When? He goes, tomorrow. He goes, I didn't realize y'all had so many pretty women. I said, yeah, there's 660 of them here tonight. And I said, a lot of them have money, but yes, Rockwall County has the prettiest women around here. And he goes, I believe you. High compliment to the ladies that live here in Rockwall County. The man was very impressed. But we did a good thing Saturday night. We raised a lot of money for our Child Advocacy Center that benefits children and families here throughout Rockwall County. There's going to be other charity events coming up in the near future. I couldn't begin to name all of them because I can't keep up with all the dates without looking at my calendar. One thing I do want to mention tonight, and this will be followed up in the near future, but one of the things that we talked about or that y'all had mentioned was fire department. Well, we now have McLendon-Chisholm Fire Rescue, but prior to that was McLendon-Chisholm Volunteer Fire Department. Well, they're no longer in existence. The thing is, they were in existence up until here just recently, and I mean within the last month, meaning that since 1979, they were in existence for 40 years, protecting us as citizens of McLendon-Chisholm, but as well as parts of the unincorporated area. I'm just going to tell you on record, thank you very much to those that may be present that have ever spent the time to volunteer or had any hand in the volunteer fire department. They did a great job. They did a really good job. And what you will find sometime in the next couple of council meetings, we're going to do a nice proclamation for them. They deserve it. Some of those gentlemen now work for our city-owned fire department. Some have moved on to do other things. But we owe them a debt of gratitude for what they've done, because if you've ever done volunteer work, you're doing a lot of stuff and you ain't getting paid for it. But you do it because of the kindness of your heart and what you feel in your heart is right. And we owe those guys a debt of gratitude. And I want to say thank you to them while I'm in the middle of my announcements. Other than that, we're in that season where the kids are out and about because school started. We're starting into the holiday season. Halloween's coming up. National Night Out is coming up. And then we get into Thanksgiving and Christmas. So be wary of the kids and drive safe. From what I saw this morning on Facebook, there was a lot of traffic delays throughout this area. People were posting pictures about all the red lines everywhere where there was traffic backed up. Didn't matter if it was 205, I-30, all of them. So be careful while you're out there. Ms. Kipphut, do you have anything?
I do. The brick campaign, the Mason is going to start laying the foundation next week. So the concrete will be laid, and then I'll be submitting the brick orders on Monday to the company that's going to do our engraving. As of actually tonight, we have about 110 bricks that we're going to be getting engraved, counting the citizen input, the bricks for those that are veterans that are laid to rest in the Chisholm Cemetery, and the pages that we're going to have surrounding the memorial that pay homage to America's participation in wars since its inception. So we'll have everything in place for Veterans Day.
Okay. Mr. Hodges? Huh? Okay. Trudy? MC50, all that stuff? What's the date on it to remind everybody?
It is October 19th, 1 to 4.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Bloom?
Only thing, economic development is still something that's important, and we are looking for volunteers to participate. Mr. Herron, if you want to, I'll reach out to you. Someone from P&Z would be great, obviously, and anyone else who feels like they can contribute. We're not specific. If you feel like you have something to bring, we welcome your input and your help. So the city application is on, or the website is on the city, application is on the website if you just go to McLendon-Chisholm.com. Thank you.
Mr. Dahl? No, okay. Well, if there's nothing else, the time is 7:45. Tonight's meeting is adjourned.
I wrote down a few things.
November 10th. We're celebrating it November 15th. This year, the Duke's Law with cake and alcohol.
Okay. Is that Veterans Day?
Well, Bob's where it's going to be. That's right, just kick it. It's no big deal.